Okay, so in this video, we'll be talking about the informative speech and forming body sections. Actually, the subtitle said, creating effective body sections. So, the body sections are very important, and in this speech, you'll be required to have at least a few of them. Basically, they follow a really specific formula, just like the introduction. If you guys are beginning to see a pattern here, what I'm teaching you is basically a formula that you can apply to almost any public speaking scenario that you could possibly think of. So if we look at a body section, it has claim, support, fact, and transition. So you can have multiple claims and lots of supports in more complex speeches, but for this assignment, you'll need to keep it simple. This means basically you'll need 3 body sections, 3 claims, and 3 supporting references. A claim is basically the mini thesis of your body section, and it opens up the discussion with the claim that you're making related to your thesis. So in the last video, I used weightlifting as an example. I'm going to continue with that. What if I claim that weightlifting is an anaerobic exercise that's just as effective as jogging if it's done correctly? Now, if I'm giving this speech, people who are runners or just people who aren't really aware of weightlifting might be like, no, that's not true. Well, guess what? I can one-up them. How do I do it? Well, after I make that claim, I have to support that claim with facts. So, seems simple, right? And finding the support actually is where we do research, which we'll actually cover when we do our persuasive speeches in the next module. But for right now, right, we're just going to say that support is the process of finding sources that have the facts that you need. So, sources basically need to be reliable. Once again, we'll cover this later, but for now, just assume that you're always going to want to go towards what's called a primary source. There are secondary sources. I'm not going to talk about those right now. Primary sources in a speech are either academic sources, which is paper and research. They're news sources, which include reliable newspapers or magazines that report legitimate news, like the New York Times or something like that. You don't want to go to, I don't know, The Onion or something like that. Well, if you're talking about satire, The Onion would be a great source to look at, but basically, you get my drift. Don't be going to, aliennews.org in order to prove the existence of extraterrestrials run by some strange man in a trailer in Arizona. That's not really a reliable thing. And guess what? Your listeners are going to know that if you come up with shady sources. It's going to reduce your ability to convince them because they're going to think you did shoddy research. Just like my platypus speech. A little funky there, right? That's because I didn't look up Aboriginal legends about the platypus. So I sounded kind of dumb. The other thing is organizations and or expert sources. So an organization would be something like, say the American Heart Association, which I'm going to use later, which is actually comprised of experts on cardiovascular health. Additionally, you could, I don't know, if you wanted to do a lot of work, go and interview a doctor who counts as an expert. Hey, guess what? You guys are in college, which means all of your professors count as experts in their fields of study, which means that if you actually want to go and do an interview and have an expert source where you actually ask them, you can, and I'll be really impressed if you do that, because going directly to the source is a great way to convince people of things. So you'll get a lot of kudos. Can't say points, but kudos might get you points. Wink, wink. All right. Once you find your support, you're going to have to skim those support articles or resources for facts, the facts that you need to back up your claim. So looking for facts basically supports all the basis of research, right? This is what we do. So the American Heart Association magazine circulation, oddly enough, has recently updated the list of activities that directly benefit heart health to include weightlifting. Additionally, I did some other research because I asked why. Findings from the 2014 study done by Harvard Medical School says that weightlifting is actually more effective for keeping trim and reducing belly fat than running. Belly fat, guess what, according to the American Heart Association, is the #1 danger when it comes to heart failure. Do you see a pattern here? So this is how I'm going to begin to construct claim, support, fact, and transition in my body section. Remember, this is just one. So this would be the last one. If you look back to the introductory video, I laid out the body sections. This is the last one in that list. The one before this one will be dexterity, and the one before that would be resistance training. So your body section, when you outline it, should look a little something like this. Like I said, if you're confused about outlining, go see the video that I made on the Pearson outlining tool. This is how I like to do mine because it makes sure that everything is there. So, just so we don't forget, the claim here is that weightlifting is actually an anaerobic exercise, meaning that the muscles have a lack of oxygen rather than a surplus. Anaerobic exercises like weightlifting usually last a shorter time. After all, you can't live without oxygen. But it still raises your endurance and can be just as effective as jogging if done correctly. So that's my claim. Support 1. Weightlifting can be aerobic. And actually, no, it can't be. It's anaerobic, but we oftentimes use the term aerobic exercise to mean something that is that's healthy for you. So American Heart Association. So the fact that we found right in their magazine Circulation in 2007, the American Heart Association finally admitted that what all weightlifters already knew, resistance training is beneficial for the heart and circulatory system. So support 2, it raises endurance. And the source for that is Medical News Today. Sorry, I didn't put it on there. So the fact that I found is, according to Medical News Today, research shows that when properly supervised and prescribed in the light of a patient's history and condition, whether they have cardiovascular disease or not, resistance training increases muscular strength, endurance, independence, and the ability to perform a large range of activities. It reduces disability and enhances quality of life. Other benefits include increase in bone mineral density and lean body mass. Yeah. So, this is Medical News Today, thing done in 2007. Finally, the third thing that I said is it's as effective as jogging. And once again, I accidentally forgot to put the source in there, but they're down here, so whatever. In addition, weightlifting, despite being anaerobic, is more effective than running or jogging when it comes to controlling belly fat, a primary cause of poor cardiovascular health. According to a 2014 study done by Harvard Medical School, lifting is more effective for maintaining a flat stomach than running or cycling, especially for middle-aged men. The study found, according to Men's Health Magazine, according to Men's Health Magazine 2014, that men who spent 20 minutes of daily weight training gain less abdominal fat as they age compared with men who spend the same time hitting the pavement or pushing pedals. So, you'll notice something that when I'm naming the source, I always name the name of the source and the date that it was released. Why? Because if I was naming a source from 1916, well, the audience might be a little less inclined to believe me, since everybody was crazy back then. No, I'm just kidding, but they didn't know a lot. So you always want your sources to be pretty, I guess you could say, recent, unless you're actually studying something historical, like, oh, I don't know, Woodstock. You know, a source from Woodstock back in 1969 would probably be pretty cool. So, you know, in historical research, that actually goes back on it. But if you're talking about things like what I'm talking about here, basically, the more recent you are, the better off you are. So, a really basic template, and this is a short little video because it's really, really easy if you just use this. My body section basically turns out like this. Weightlifting is actually an anaerobic exercise, meaning that the muscles have a lack of oxygen rather than a surplus. Anaerobic exercises like weightlifting usually last a shorter time. After all, you can't live without oxygen. But it still raises your endurance and can be just as effective as jogging if it is done correctly. In their magazine Circulation, 2007, the American Heart Association finally admitted what all weightlifters already knew. Resistance training is beneficial for the heart and circulatory system. According to Medical News Today, 2007, research shows that when properly supervised and prescribed in the light of a patient's history and condition, whether they have cardiovascular disease or not, resistance training increases muscular strength, endurance, independence, and ability to perform a large range of activities. It reduces disability and enhances quality of life. Other benefits include increase in bone mineral density and lean body mass. In addition, weightlifting, despite being anaerobic, is more effective than running or jogging when it comes to controlling belly fat, a primary cause of poor cardiovascular health. According to a 2014 study done by Harvard Medical School, lifting is more effective for maintaining a flat stomach than running or cycling, especially for middle-aged men. The study found, according to Men's Health Magazine 2014, that men who spent 20 minutes of daily weight training gained less abdominal fat as they aged, compared with men who spent the same time hitting the pavement or pushing pedals. Ah, wow, that was pretty easy, right? That's a pretty distinct little body thing once we put it into chunks, and this is why we outline. Now, on here, I did not put the transition because this is a concluding thing, but a transition basically leads you in, right, to the, in this case, the conclusion, which we won't actually talk about until we get to the persuasive speech module. So, right, we'll leave that off, and we'll also cover transitions really in depth in the persuasive speech module, because that's where they really start to count, especially your conclusion. Persuasive speech is very important, but in this, right, you would just transition to the conclusion by saying, in conclusion, and then of course, if you go back to the other video that I did talking about IBC, right, I talked briefly about conclusions. All you do, right, is just summarize what you've said. So re-summarize the 3 body paragraphs. And you might think this is repetitive, but believe me, as a teacher over the years, I've learned that people don't listen to you. So basically repeating yourself over and over and over again is a great way of, if they didn't hear it the first time, only saying it once means that they never heard it. But if you say it like 10 times, basically, at least they're going to get it once. And that is the cardinal rule of public speaking, is repeat yourself a lot, because that way people will remember it. It's not that people are bad or anything like that. It's just that they got other things on their mind. All sorts of stuff is going on. They're thinking about their grocery list. They're thinking about this. They're thinking about that. They're thinking about the last episode of Game of Thrones, and they zone out for a second and they miss something. So it's great to just go back over it. So in your conclusion, right, once you get finished, each one of these body paragraphs needs to be briefly, very briefly, gone back over. Also, finally, in your conclusion, you need to end with another sort of attention-getting device, but it's an exit device. So yet another either quote, an anecdote, anything like that, really. Once again, we'll talk about conclusions a little more in depth. But as you can see, it's really, really simple when you apply it into a formula. So there we go, introductions and body sections.